Well, joining us now is Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, you've been an advisor to US Central Command, Joe Biden and the UK, talking about a limited and proportionate response. How do they control that?
Well, that's $1 million question. So what they're trying to do is a single strike to alter the risk-reward calculus of the Houthis and ultimately through them the Iranians, with the objective of de-escalating tensions and restoring stability in the Red Sea, because keeping the sea lanes open is a vital UK interest, and it's an interest for freedom of navigation and it's the bedrock of international trade. Now, of course, it's the Houthis who get to determine whether that single act is the only thing that happens, or whether this is a longer campaign. And that is a difficulty in these things because, of course, the region, which most people don't know much about, has been a source of conflict since 2015 with Operation Decisive Storm, when there was an intervention after the civil war broke out with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and it wasn't decisive and it wasn't a storm, and it's still really ongoing since 2015. And indeed, there was a UAE ship, which was a landing ship, which was nearly sunk by a Houthi missile in 2016. So there is a pattern of activity here. It is right, I think, that we take the action because the consequences in terms of international trade and inflation and all those things with the fragility of supply chains means that this is probably correct. Whether you need to take more action, as I said, will be determined by whether the Houthis escalate. And they had to take action because on the 11th of January was the 27th attack by the Houthis since 19th of November. And you can only, to use a baseball analogy, which was used by the previous CENTCOM commander, you can only catch for so long. At some stage, you've got to pitch, that is, take offensive operations, not just defensive operations of trying to knock down cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and one-way drones.
And that's the line that's being parroted. 26 attack. The Houthis were warned that action would be taken, and action was indeed taken. Now, the Houthis say they will continue to prevent Israeli ships or other ships going to Israel from passing through the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. There is a real concern here of escalation in the region, isn't there? We've got many countries coming out. For example, Jordan has also expressed concern over developments in the Red Sea region, the impact on regional security. Many other countries. We've also got Iran strongly condemning UK and US attacks against the Houthis, saying it's a violation of Yemen's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Yeah, that might be so. I think some of the stuff, for example, from Jordan would be more rhetoric rather than reality. You can escalate in 7 ways. You can escalate by weapons, objectives, targets, domains, geography, rhetoric, or by mobilization. Now, actually, Jordan is one of the nations which is really suffering. One of the things you have to look at is when you do these strikes is who is allowed what we call access basing and overflight. So we know that the operation from a UK perspective took off from Cyprus. What nations did they have to fly over and transit to launch their weapons? The same with the Americans. And somewhere in that mix, you'll find Saudi Arabia and Jordan, who would have given assent for that to happen. Iran has always been a malign actor. Indeed, there's really 6 armies which Iran has created, both substate actors in the region: the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the PMF, that's the Popular Mobilization of forces in Iraq, which have been attacking the Americans since the 7th of October, and 2 Shia militias, one from Afghanistan and one from Pakistan in Syria. So really, from the perspective of the Houthis and the Iranians, this is part of what they call the theatre of war, which is defined by the largeness of the geographical region. It's what they perceive to be a unity of fronts against the Israelis and a ring of fire, but they haven't limited their attacks to Israeli ships. It's the international community, and one of the complexities of international shipping is ownership, registration, flagging, and crewing, and they're all from different multiple nations at multiple times.
Let's look at some of the specifics of the attacks last night. 4 RAF Typhoon jets from RAF Akrotiri, supported by 2 air-to-air refuelling tankers. The US, of course, this was strikes launched from the air, from the sea, from ships, from submarines as well. What about the targets? What would constitute meaningful targets in Yemen?
Well, you have to look at what the threats have been, and you'll see what they probably went for. So we've had coastal defense cruise missiles, we've had ballistic missiles for the infrastructure of those sites, we've had UAV drone swarms, so the locations of those, and we've had unmanned surface vessels. So probably they've attacked some of the ports on the side to try and take those out. Now, it was the aim of this, of course, was only to disrupt and degrade. It wasn't to destroy the entire capability. That would give potentially the Houthis that let-out clause, that is, that they still have stuff in the bag if they have not been deterred. But the object of this is really deterrence by punishment, deterrence by denial. The fact that the Western forces have been there under Operation Prosperity Guardian to try and safeguard the passage of those ships has clearly not worked with the 27 attacks which have occurred, as I said, since the 19th of November.
You mentioned Operation Prosperity Guardian. Our assets have been slowly building in the area, but also the UK and the US, very clear to point out this is part of a much broader coalition of countries, some 10 countries. France now has just reaffirmed its condemnation of the Houthi strikes on ships in the Red Sea. It comes moments after the Danish foreign minister also said he fully supported the US and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, and again, the Operation Prosperity Guardian was originally 10 nations originally signed on to it. There were more nations than that, but again, for purposes of putting themselves in the line of fire, some nations don't want to go in the open air with their commitment to this sort of thing. So we think that there are at least 19 nations in Prosperity Guardian. It is based on a pre-existing coalition maritime force because the American Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain. Bahrain is one of those nations which has provided support to the operation which occurred overnight. And as I said, that's where the US Fifth Fleet are based. And that reason for that, of course, is to make sure that the other key waterway in the area, the Strait of Hormuz, is also kept open and not closed by malign activity of Iran in the future.
Major General Chip Chapman, thank you very much indeed.